I stood in my kitchen, pie server in hand, as my grandson's voice drifted from across the room. She won't be around next year, Jason whispered, laughing into his wine glass like he hadn't just buried me with a sentence. The sweet smell of Thanksgiving clung to the air, but my chest went hollow. After raising him like my own son, after years of birthdays, band-aids, and bedtime stories, my grandson had decided I was nothing more than square footage waiting to be claimed. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The fireplace crackled softly in the background, casting a golden glow over Evelyn Hart's living room. The table stretched wide under the weight of roasted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce in her grandmother's crystal bowl, and her signature sweet potato casserole topped with toasted marshmallows. The scent of cinnamon and sage filled the air, familiar, comforting. But Evelyn felt cold. She moved quietly between the table and the kitchen island, a pie server in one hand, the other steadying a warm pumpkin pie. Her joints ached more than usual this year, but she kept her smile gentle, her posture straight, always composed. The conversation around her was light but clipped, scattered with forced laughter. Jason was in the far corner near the window, a glass of wine lazily balanced in his fingers. He leaned in close to his cousin Logan, both men in their late 20s, dressed more like they were at a rooftop bar than Grandma's Thanksgiving. She won't be around next year, Jason whispered, grinning into the rim of his glass. Then the house is mine. Logan gave a tight chuckle, unsure whether it was meant as a joke or not. Evelyn, just a few steps away, froze. Her hearing wasn't what it used to be, but those words landed clear and sharp, like ice cracking underfoot. She didn't flinch, didn't drop the pie. She simply placed it gently on the counter and turned, smiling as she cut the first slice. The laughter in the room swelled and dipped again, a background hum to the dull pounding behind her temples. "Who's ready for dessert?" she called out, voice warm, practiced. Claire, her daughter, looked up from the table and forced a laugh, brushing an invisible thread from her sweater. "Mom, you really outdid yourself again." Jason raised his glass mockingly. "To the Queen of Thanksgiving." Evelyn walked over and began serving, starting with the children. Her movements were smooth, steady, but her thoughts raced. Every holiday, every birthday, every scraped knee she'd bandaged when Jason was a boy, all of it evaporated in that moment. Doris Kelly, her best friend and neighbor, sat quietly across the table, eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't say a word, but Evelyn caught the tilt of her head, the way her gaze lingered. Mark, Evelyn's son-in-law, reached for seconds without looking up. Claire sipped her wine a little too quickly. No one else seemed to have noticed. Evelyn returned to the kitchen to fetch the whipped cream. Her hands trembled now, just slightly. She steadied them on the marble counter, watching her own reflection in the dark oven glass. She thought of the deed, tucked in her fireproof box upstairs, of the will she hadn't looked at in years, of the boy she once rocked to sleep in her arms, now grown into a man who saw her only as square footage and dollar signs. Back at the table, Jason was showing Logan something on his phone, laughing again. Evelyn walked back in, pouring whipped cream over each slice with delicate precision. "Here you go, Doris," she said, placing a plate before her friend. Doris smiled, though her eyes were sharp. "Smells like a little heaven." Evelyn sat slowly, folding her napkin in her lap. Claire leaned over and touched her arm gently. "You okay, Mom? You've been quiet." Evelyn gave a soft smile. "Just a bit tired, that's all." Jason clinked his glass. "Well, let's toast again. To family traditions, and to the future." The word future hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn raised her glass, touching its rim to Jason's without a sound. Her eyes didn't waver. Doris's hand lightly touched Evelyn's under the table. Not a word passed between them, but it was enough. Outside, the wind swept against the windows. A storm was coming, and Evelyn had just decided she wasn't going to let it pass quietly. The morning after Thanksgiving, the house was still, eerily so. No dishes clinking, no footsteps overhead. Just Evelyn Hart, alone at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee cooling in her. A half-folded napkin from last night still sat on the placemat across from her, the cranberry stain shaped like a teardrop. She pushed her chair back slowly and stood, her slippers barely making a sound against the oak floor. The upstairs hallway smelled faintly of lavender and furniture polish, comfortingly familiar. But when she opened the linen closet and reached for the locked fireproof box on the top shelf, her fingers trembled. Back in her bedroom, she placed the box on her neatly made bed and sat beside it. The key, taped beneath the top drawer of her nightstand, clicked smoothly in the lock. Inside, a neatly stacked folder of financial statement, property deeds, birth certificate, and finally, the will. She took it out gently, like an old photograph, and unfolded the cream-colored pages with the embossed notary seal still visible at the bottom corner. Jason Hart, primary beneficiary. Her name was printed in elegant script, his in bold, unfeeling block letters. She stared at the line for a long time. He'd get the house, the savings, the investments, every dime she'd earned and saved over the last 50 years. It was all mapped out, based on love that no longer existed. A sharp pain pulsed behind her sternum. She set the papers on her lap and closed her eyes. She saw Jason at age 5, falling off his bike on the sidewalk out front, crying, red-cheeked, and scraping at her arm as she carried him inside. She remembered the way he clung to her neck, sticky with sweat and tears. She remembered his teenage years, the attitude, the slammed doors. But even then, she never doubted his heart. Until last night. She opened her eyes slowly, gaze falling again on his name, the same name she had whispered in prayers, written on birthday cards. And now it read like a signature on her erasure. There was a soft knock at the door. Evelyn startled, folding the papers quickly. "Morning," Doris called, voice muffled. "Can I come in?" Evelyn slid the will back into its folder and closed the box. "It's open," she said. Doris walked in carrying a paper bag. "I brought you the lemon muffins you like, from Porter's." Evelyn offered a tired smile, patting the edge of the bed. "You didn't have to—" "I know." Doris sat. "But you looked like hell last night." Evelyn didn't argue. She looked down at her lap. "He meant it, Doris. He thinks I'm just a placeholder, a line item." Doris let out a breath. "If he's counting down your breaths, then it's time to cut him off your pages." Evelyn didn't respond right away. She turned, slowly placing the fireproof box back on the nightstand. Her fingers lingered on the lid. "I need to call Laura." Doris nodded, calm and certain. "She'll know what to do." Outside, the rain had started, Portland's steady, whispering drizzle that settled into everything like a second skin. Later that evening, Evelyn sat by the fire with a legal pad on her lap. Names, numbers, institution. She was taking inventory, not just of assets, but of people. Who had truly been there, who had loved without waiting for the payout. She picked up her iPad, her glasses sliding slightly down her nose. She hadn't opened Facebook in weeks, but Jason had tagged her. The post was public. "Some people live in a house. I'm about to own one. The future looks very good." Smirking selfie, glass of wine in hand. Location: Portland, Oregon, home for the holidays. Evelyn stared at the screen, unmoving. Then she opened her contacts and tapped Laura Grant, estate attorney. Her finger hovered just a second before pressing call. It rang twice. "Laura speaking." "Hi," Evelyn said, voice even. "I think we need to make some changes." The elevator chimed softly as it opened onto the 12th floor of the glass and brick building just off Burnside. Evelyn stepped out, her coat damp from the drizzle outside, her leather bag clutched tightly in both hands. The reception area of Grant and Whitmore LLP was sleek, modern, a far cry from the hospital break rooms where she'd spent decades calming dying patients and frantic families. "Mrs. Hart," the receptionist greeted, standing. "Ms. Grant is ready for you." Evelyn nodded politely, stepping past the paneled glass walls toward a corner office that overlooked the rainy sprawl of Portland. Laura Grant stood as Evelyn entered, offering a firm handshake and the kind of reassuring smile Evelyn remembered from the last time they'd met, after Frank's passing, when the house and accounts had needed retitling. "You look well," Laura said, motioning her toward a high-backed chair. "I'm not here for small talk today," Evelyn replied softly, sitting with careful precision. "We need to change the will." Laura's brows arched slightly but didn't press. Instead, she pulled a tablet from her desk and began typing. "Let's start with the current structure. Jason Hart is your primary heir? For now," Evelyn said. Then, more firmly, "Not for much longer." Laura glanced up, her expression sharpening. "Understood. Would you like to adjust percentages or remove him entirely?" Evelyn's hands folded in her lap, knuckles pale. I want him gone from it, cleanly, and I want what I've built to stay protected. Laura nodded once, then pulled a folder from the credenza behind her. We can draft a revision removing Jason as a beneficiary. I'll add a no contest clause. If he tries to dispute it, he loses everything. That's a good start, Evelyn said, voice steady now. But I don't just want to keep him out. I want what's left to lift people up, people who deserve it. Laura's fingers paused on the keyboard. You have specifics in mind? Nursing scholarship for students who couldn't afford to finish, and a fund for that community health nonprofit on Hawthorne. What's it called? Bridges Health Collective? Laura supplied, already typing. Evelyn nodded. That one. Put Doris as trustee. Laura raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. She'll need to sign on as witness for the will too. Are you comfortable asking her? She's already offered. Laura smiled faintly. Then we'll get started. I can have drafts ready by the end of the week. No, Evelyn said, shaking her head. Today. I don't want to leave this office with anything undone. Laura studied her for a moment, then pulled a thick binder from the shelf behind her. Give me an hour. An hour later, Evelyn sat back at the long walnut conference table, flipping through pages thick with legal precision. Her name in familiar cursive. Jason's name, nowhere. Her pen hovered above the signature line. Once you sign, Laura said gently, this version goes into effect. We can always amend later, but as of now, Jason's out. Permanently. Evelyn glanced toward the window. Fog drifted against the glass, and below, headlights bled across wet pavement like veins. She signed slowly, each letter deliberate. Initial here, and here. She did. The final stroke felt like closing a door and locking it. The office door cracked open just as Evelyn set the pen down. Doris leaned in, umbrella tucked under one arm and her coat still wet. I came up as soon as I parked, she said, stepping in. I'm guessing you didn't wait for muffins this time. Laura smiled faintly. Perfect timing. We're just wrapping. Doris walked over and looked down at the document. Everything in place? She asked. It is, Evelyn said. I'm not just rewriting a will. I'm building a wall. Doris looked over at Laura. Where do I sign? Laura passed the witness page over. Here. In ink, please. As Doris scrawled her signature across the bottom line, Evelyn stood, rolling her shoulders back. For the first time in days, her spine felt lighter, like she wasn't bracing for a fall anymore. Laura clipped the pages together, sealing them in a thick legal envelope. This version will be notarized and filed with the firm's vault copy. We'll send a confirmation for your records. Evelyn reached for the envelope and paused. Keep this one here. I'll come back for it after the final draft is filed. Of course. Evelyn turned to Doris. Lunch on me? Doris grinned. If it comes with a toast. Evelyn's lips curled faintly. It will. It was just after 7 when the call came in. Too early for pleasantry, too late to be accidental. Evelyn sat in her robe, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of lemon tea, the morning light barely filtering through the rain-slicked window. The phone buzzed once, twice, and stopped. Then it rang again. Jason. She let it go to voicemail. Then again. And again. On the 4th ring she answered. Not out of curiosity, but out of calculation. Her thumb tapped accept, and she placed the phone on speaker, letting it rest on the table beside her. Hi, Grandma. The tone was breezy, but there was an edge in it, thinly disguised agitation. I was just thinking, Jason continued. It's been a weird couple of days. You've been different. Evelyn didn't respond. He filled the silence. And I get it. You're getting older. Things feel uncertain. That's natural. So I figured we should talk about your estate. It's time to plan wisely. Evelyn finally spoke. Is that what you think I haven't been doing? He chuckled, but it was hollow. Come on, don't make this tense. I'm saying this as your grandson. You know how much I've done for this family. Loyalty goes both ways. There it was. Entitlement, cloaked as obligation. Evelyn sipped her tea. Jason, yeah? You've said enough already. Silent. Then, the brittle crack of his voice tightening. Look, if this is about something I said at Thanksgiving, it is. I was joking. You know that, right? Everyone jokes at the table. You're reading into something that doesn't. Evelyn ended the call. No fury, no explanation, just silence, sealed like a vault. She placed the phone face down and exhaled through her nose. Her heart wasn't racing. She had expected him to reach out, expected the script, the need, the guilt, the rewritten history, but now it was real. He knew something had changed, and the fear was setting in. An hour later, Doris arrived. 2 coffees in hand and a half-eaten bagel tucked into a napkin. "Got your text," she said, tossing her coat on the hall chair. "He finally called, huh?" Evelyn nodded and gestured toward the voicemail still blinking red. "He played the loyalty card," Evelyn said flatly. Doris rolled her eyes. "If that boy knew a thing about loyalty, he'd be here helping you seal donation envelopes, not scheming with his phone out." Evelyn reached into the side drawer of the hutch and retrieved a slim manila folder Laura had handed her after the signing. The preliminary draft. One more revision, one final stamp, and it would be real. "I want it filed before the weekend," Evelyn said. "Before he finds a new angle." Doris gave a satisfied nod. "Then you better call Laura." Laura answered on the second ring, voice crisp as always. "I was just going to email you," she said. "I've reviewed everything. Nothing needs tweaking. We can file Friday, if you're ready." "I want to file Thursday," Evelyn said, "and I'd like to come in person." A pause. Then, "We'll make room on the schedule." Evelyn hung up and sat back, eyes on the corner of the room where the wallpaper had started to curl from the baseboard. Frank used to say he'd fix that someday. Now she stared at it and thought, "Let it curl." She went upstairs and stood before her mirror, the same one she'd used every morning for decades. She ran a hand through her silver-gray hair, smoothing it behind her ears. Then she pulled open her bottom dresser drawer, retrieving the notepad she hadn't touched since Frank's memorial. She began writing. "Jason, if you're reading this, it means you've already learned what greed cost you." She paused, then tore the page out and tossed it into the fireplace. Not yet. She sat down at her desk instead, opening a fresh notebook. Clean pages, untouched. Her pen hovered above the first line. She wasn't writing a letter. She was preparing a speech, and not for Jason. Thursday morning came wrapped in a hush of fog. The city moved in slow silence as Evelyn stepped out of her ride-share, her heels clicking softly on the wet concrete outside Grant and Whitmore, LLP. A small leather folder rested under her arm. Nothing flashy, just clean, zippered, and purposeful. Inside the building, the receptionist offered a soft, "Good morning, Mrs. Hart." But Evelyn only nodded. She didn't need pleasantries. Not today. Laura's office was bright, but not blinding. Soft overheads, a lamp in the corner. No nonsense. The kind of room where serious things happened behind tempered glass. "Right on time," Laura said, standing. Doris was already there, perched on the couch with a thermos of black coffee and the crossword folded in her lap. She gave a wink as Evelyn entered. "I saved you a 4-letter word for vindicated. I'm hoping by the end of today it's done," Evelyn replied with a faint smile, hanging her coat on the back of the chair. Laura gestured to the table where the final documents were neatly stacked. Yellow signature tabs fluttered like tiny flags, directing her through each page. "Everything you asked for is here," Laura said. "Jason Hart has been removed in full. No percentages, no loopholes." She passed Evelyn a copy of the new distribution list. Evelyn scanned it slowly. The house and investment accounts, redirected to a community college nursing scholarship, set up under the Hart Foundation for Caregiving Excellence, a chunk of her liquid assets allocated to the Bridges Health Collective, Doris listed as trustee, and Claire, intentionally, listed only as secondary backup for administrative duties, not as heir. It was no longer a will. It was a weapon sharpened into legacy. Laura sat across from her, hands folded. "It's airtight. I included a no-contest clause. If Jason challenges it in court, he gets nothing, not even the decency of a partial share." Evelyn let the words sink in. The quiet power of them. Doris looked over. All that scheming, and he ends up with 0. Laura slid the first page toward her. "We'll start here." Evelyn picked up the pen slowly. It was heavier than she expected, gold-plated, engraved with the firm's name. Everything about this process had been carefully considered, including her. The first signature came with a long breath, then the second, then her initials, again and again, page after page, each one slicing away Jason's imagined future and carving something better in its place. When she reached the final line, she paused. "I never thought I'd do this," she said softly. "But after last week, I can't imagine not doing it." "You didn't change," Doris said. "You just stopped pretending he would." Evelyn signed the final page. One clean, elegant loop of her name. It was done. Laura gathered the stack, flipped it closed, and pressed it neatly into a blue presentation folder. You'll receive the official notarized copies next week, but as of this moment, it's legally binding. Evelyn sat back in her chair, fingers gently folding in her lap. She expected relief. Instead, she felt stillness, solid ground, like her body had been tense for months and finally remembered how to rest. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. You just gave his smirk a price tag of 0, Doris said, sipping her coffee. Whatever happens next will taste better than that bitterness he left behind. Evelyn smiled, but there was a sadness underneath. Not regret, just the quiet grief of releasing someone who'd never really held on. Laura stood. Would you like me to walk you both down? Evelyn shook her head. Number, I think I want to leave here quietly. She slipped the empty folder into her bag and stood, pulling her coat back over her shoulders. As they stepped out into the hallway, Evelyn glanced at the wall-mounted clock. 11:37 a.m. At that very moment, Jason was likely still asleep or scrolling through his phone, still picturing himself the heir of something that no longer existed. She almost pitied him. Almost. 3 weeks later, the scent of rosemary chicken and caramelized onions filled the house again, just like it had at Thanksgiving. But this time, Evelyn hadn't cooked. Claire insisted on doing it herself, fussing over the sides and overthinking the table setting until the napkin rings matched the candlesticks. Mark set out the wine glasses, and Jason brought nothing, as usual, except the same swagger he wore like a tailored coat. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. She hadn't wanted the dinner, hadn't suggested it, hadn't encouraged it. But she hadn't objected either. Let them gather. Let them pretend. Jason pulled out the chair next to her, sat with the easy confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. Smells incredible in here, he said, draping his cloth napkin across his lap. Feels like a victory lap. Doris, seated to Evelyn's right, nearly choked on her sip of Pinot. She leaned closer and whispered, You want me to say something reckless, or should I let him keep digging? Evelyn didn't answer. Her gaze drifted to the steam rising from the mashed potatoes. Her fork rested untouched. Claire sat across from her, smiling too wide, too forced. Everything came out okay, right? The timing, the seating, it's all fine? You did a lovely job, Evelyn said quietly. Claire visibly relaxed. Jason poured himself a full glass of red and another for Mark, who took it without looking up. So, Jason said, raising his glass slightly, how's everyone feeling about the new year? Big changes ahead, huh? The silence in the room rippled like wind over still water. I mean, we're not kids anymore, he went on. We all gotta start thinking about the future, especially with the house and all. Mark cleared his throat, glancing nervously toward Claire. Evelyn took a slow sip of her water, watching Jason over the rim of her glass. He couldn't see it, couldn't feel it. The shift. He still believed the estate was his, that her stillness meant surrender. You've always said this place should stay in the family, Jason added, looking directly at Evelyn now. I think it's time we start planning around that. Doris leaned back, amused, her fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass. You always were good at planning things that aren't yours. Jason blinked, his grin tightening just slightly. Claire tried to intervene. Mom, are you okay? You've been really quiet lately. I'm fine, Evelyn replied. Her voice was soft but steady, just taking it all in. Jason raised his glass again, trying to steer the moment. Well, to the future of this house, he said brightly, and everything it means to this family. Evelyn didn't lift her glass right away. She looked at him, really looked at him. And then, without a word, she picked up her glass and clinked it gently against his. The sound was delicate, almost ceremonial. Jason sat back, satisfied. Doris smirked into her drink. Evelyn didn't smile, didn't blink, just drank. After dinner, the kitchen buzzed with leftover packing and awkward laughter. Claire scrubbed dishes too loudly. Mark dried them, mostly silent. Jason was in the living room scrolling on his phone, feet on the coffee table. Evelyn stood at the threshold, just watching. Doris came up beside her. He doesn't have a clue. No, Evelyn said. He has a fantasy, and I'm done playing the set piece in it. Doris touched her shoulder lightly. When's the foundation announcement? Monday, public. Press release goes out at noon. And the house? Already appraised. It'll be liquidated before year's end, half to scholarships, half to bridges. Doris let out a low, appreciative whistle. You're about to burn his whole castle down, and he thinks he's already crowned. Evelyn nodded once. Let him sleep in the ashes. It started with a phone call from Laura. Evelyn was folding laundry upstairs. Nothing dramatic, just the rhythm of cotton and silence. When her cell buzzed on the nightstand, Laura's name. No preamble. He tried to access your accounts, Laura said. At the bank. Online and in person. Evelyn didn't respond right away. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the warmth of the drier, fresh towel still clinging to her palms. They flagged it as suspicious. A teller recognized him, said he came in asking for full statement, balances, transfers, even CDs. He claimed he was authorized under your estate planning. Evelyn's voice was steady. He's not. They know. They denied the request and filed an internal report. But it's worth noting, he's fishing now, getting bolder. Evelyn nodded to no one, eyes scanning the woven patterns of the folded quilt on her bed. Thank you for the heads up, she said. Anything else? I suggest we lock down visibility on every non-trust account. I'll send instructions. I'll handle it today. And Evelyn, Laura added, voice tightening, I've worked with a lot of families. When someone this entitled starts losing ground, they usually get louder before they get quiet. I'm not afraid of noise, Evelyn said. I'm afraid of regret. And I don't have any. She hung up. By the time Jason called that evening, Evelyn had already changed her online banking credential, enabled two-factor authentication, and pulled out her oldest notebook, the one she used when she needed her mind to be sharper than her memory. She took the call while staring out the kitchen window, watching the last of the November leaves scatter across the yard. Grandma, Jason started, voice tight, clipped. We need to have a serious conversation. About what? You know about what. I went to the bank because I thought we were on the same page. I thought after our dinner, we understood each other. I understood you, Jason, Evelyn said. I understood exactly who you are. He didn't like that. You've always said you wanted this to stay in the family. You promised me. I promised to make sure my family was taken care of. And I am. I'm your blood. That house is part of our story. I should have access to help manage things before something happens and it's too late. Evelyn let the silence stretch. Then, with absolute calm, not now, not ever. There was a pause. And then, you've changed, Jason snapped. You're letting people get in your head. Doris, that lawyer, you're isolating yourself from the people who actually matter. I'm clearing space, Evelyn said, from the people who never did. The line went dead a moment later. She didn't call him back. Later that night, Doris came by with a grocery bag and 2 slices of pecan pie from Garrison's. I brought sugar and sarcasm, she said, stepping into the kitchen. Which do you want first? Both, Evelyn said, pulling down 2 forks. Doris slid into a chair. He blew up, didn't he? Evelyn nodded. Tried to get into the accounts. Doris blinked. Seriously? Denied. Well, Doris said, taking a bite of pie. Every tantrum just proves your point. Evelyn opened her notebook and held it up. I've started documenting everything. Dates, calls, comments, online posts, smart. I want a full record, not just for court. For me. Doris tilted her head. You worried he'll push it that far? I think he already has, Evelyn said. And I think this is only the beginning. It arrived on a Tuesday. A plain white envelope in the mailbox. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Northeast Portland. The handwriting was sharp, slanted, rushed, but familiar. Evelyn stood on her porch with her coat zipped to her chin, watching the gray clouds roll in over the trees. The envelope weighed nothing in her hand, but the tone inside it hit like a slammed door. She opened it with a paring knife from the kitchen. No greeting, no signature, just blocky, angry sentences typed on cheap printer paper. You've embarrassed this family long enough. Whatever spell that attorney has you under, it's making you paranoid. If you keep dragging your legacy through the mud, don't expect anyone to be around when it's over. We're done watching you throw away everything you built. You're old. You're vulnerable. You're not thinking straight. Get help, or get out of the way. Evelyn set the letter down on the counter, placed a drinking glass over the corner to keep it from curling, and took a long, measured breath. Then she walked into the den, opened her filing cabinet, and slid the letter into a red folder labeled JH Escalation. It landed softly atop a printed screenshot from Jason's blocked login attempt the week before. By noon, she was seated across from Laura again, the letter resting in an evidence envelope between them. Laura didn't even flinch. She picked it up with a gloved hand, evidence protocol, and read it silently. When she finished, she set it down like it was a used napkin. We'll add a no-contact clause to the trust documents and your living will. Explicit and immediate. Can we do more? If this escalates again, I'd recommend a restraining order. Based on this tone, the court won't blink. Evelyn nodded once. Laura tapped a few keys, her screen reflecting in her glasses. I'll also add a digital harassment clause. Any documented attempts at intimidation or coercion automatically trigger a third-party review. We'll let the law speak his language. That evening, Doris let herself in with her spare key, carrying a grocery tote and her iPad tucked under one arm. Please tell me you didn't read the comments on his last post, she said, setting the tote down. I didn't, Evelyn replied. But I did read a letter. Doris arched an eyebrow. Typed. Anonymous. No return address. Laura's locking it into my records. Well, subtlety isn't exactly his strong suit. Evelyn poured 2 cups of peppermint tea and passed one over. We're adding clauses, she said. No contact language, digital protections. He can yell into the void all he wants. He just won't get close. Doris sat and took a slow sip. You should lock down your online presence too. Change passwords. Nuke old accounts. Every piece of you that's floating around out there is a breadcrumb for a boy who's losing his mind. Evelyn nodded. I started yesterday. Deactivated Facebook. Scrubbed the rest. Bank logins are on 2-factor. And I pulled the old credit monitoring service back online. Good, Doris said. You're not hiding. You're insulating. I'm protecting my peace, Evelyn said softly. She stared down at her tea, steam rising between her fingers. There was no more fear in her stomach, only an icy clarity, like the fog had finally lifted, and she could see Jason for what he was. A man drowning in his own entitlement, clawing at anyone who wouldn't jump in after him. Across town, Jason paced the kitchen of his apartment, slamming cabinet doors without purpose. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, jaw set. She's ruining everything, Jason hissed, jabbing a finger toward his phone on the counter. I tried to be patient. I tried to be subtle. Subtle? Claire said. You sent her a threat. It wasn't a threat. It was a wake-up call. Claire shook her head, her voice low. She's not the one who needs waking up. The courtroom smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. A sterile kind of seriousness Evelyn remembered from her days in hospital administration. But this was different. Here, the sick didn't ask for help. They demanded power. Evelyn sat straight-backed at the petitioner's table, her blazer crisp, her silver hair pinned tight. Laura sat beside her, files fanned across a leather portfolio, calm as always. Across the aisle, Jason slouched in his chair in a tailored navy suit that didn't fit his posture. Claire sat behind him, her expression unreadable, lips pressed into a flat line. Mark wasn't there. Judge Cole entered with practiced indifference. She was a woman in her 60s, thick-rimmed glasses, sharp chin, and not the slightest tolerance for theatrics. Let's proceed, she said, flipping through her docket. Petition for adult guardianship, filed by Mr. Jason Hart against Ms. Evelyn Hart, on the basis of diminished mental capacity. Counsel, your floor. Jason's attorney, young, polished, smug, rose. Your Honor, we intend to show that Ms. Hart's recent legal decisions demonstrate confusion, possible coercion, and an alarming disregard for familial welfare. My client is simply trying to protect his grandmother and ensure her legacy isn't destroyed by manipulation. Judge Cole raised one eyebrow. Your client stands to benefit financially from this? Yes? A pause. Then, yes, Your Honor, but his concern is her well-being. The judge murmured, already unimpressed. Jason stood to speak. She's not the woman she was a year ago. She's paranoid, obsessed with controlling everything. She's shutting out family, cutting people off, giving money away to strangers. Evelyn didn't look at him. She was watching the judge. She listens to a lawyer more than her own blood, Jason added, voice rising. She's being misled. I just want her protected. When he sat down, Laura stood slowly. We have over 200 pages of financial documentation, she said clearly, all reviewed and filed within legal guidelines. Ms. Hart has passed a recent medical and psychological evaluation, which is already in your docket under tab 4. No signs of cognitive impairment, no undue influence. just a woman who's exercising her rights, competently and legally. She passed the judge a folder. Ms. Hart has not only retained her faculty, she's expanded her estate with greater intentionality than most people half her age. The only person destabilized by her choices, Laura added, is the person who no longer benefits from them. Judge Cole turned to Evelyn. Would you like to speak, Ms. Hart? Evelyn stood. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it carried. I'm not confused. I'm not isolated. And I'm not out of control. What I am is finished with people mistaking entitlement for love. She turned slightly, addressing the judge, but letting Jason hear every word. I worked 2 jobs for decades. I buried my husband and kept this family afloat. I'm not being taken advantage of. I'm taking back the dignity that people like my grandson would strip away, $1 at a time. The courtroom was silent. Claire shifted in her seat, her eyes glassy. Judge Cole cleared her throat. I've reviewed the evidence, the evaluations, the financials, and the very troubling tone of Mr. Hart's previous communication, some of which have been submitted under sworn affidavit. Jason's face flushed. This is not guardianship, the judge said. This is retaliation. She looked Jason dead in the eye. Petition denied. Furthermore, Mr. Hart, you will not approach, contact, or harass your grandmother, physically or digitally, without consequences. If this escalates, the court will consider a protection order, and if necessary, contempt proceedings. Jason tried to interrupt, but, Your Honor, you're done. The gavel hit once, sharp and final. Outside the courtroom, Laura exhaled slowly. She doesn't raise her voice, she said, impressed, but she makes herself heard. Doris appeared at the top of the courthouse steps, holding out Evelyn's coat like a queen's attendant. How'd he do? She asked, sliding sunglasses down her nose. Exactly as expected, Evelyn replied. Loud, sloppy, empty. The letter arrived on Jason's doorstep 2 days after the court hearing, a pale blue envelope, stiff and official. His name, printed in black ink above the words, Hart v. Hart, post-hearing cost allocation. Jason tore it open, standing barefoot in his kitchen. Dana was halfway through pouring coffee when she heard the rip, followed by the silent, then a sharp, ugly laugh. You've got to be kidding me. He slapped the letter down on the counter, letting the pages fan out. Legal fees, administrative costs, documentation processing, psychological evaluation, all itemized, all added up. $8,432.65, payable within 30 days. Dana read the total, blinking. They're making you pay her court costs? Because she won, Jason spat. They're treating me like I'm the villain. Dana leaned back against the fridge. You filed the petition. You dragged her into court. I tried to help her. She's being manipulated. Dana folded her arms. Jason, you sent her a threatening letter, tried to hack her bank, and publicly accused her of dementia. She is losing it. She outmaneuvered you in court, Dana said calmly. That's not confusion. That's clarity. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence in the kitchen stretched until the fridge motor kicked on. Dana sighed. I think I'm gonna stay with my sister for a few days. He looked up sharply. Seriously? She was already walking away. I don't want to be around when you convince yourself this is someone else's fault again. Evelyn read the court's reimbursement notice with a sense of quiet detachment. The firm had already transferred the awarded sum into her account. She wrote one check. It was made out to the Hart Foundation for Caregiving Excellence, marked Initial Grant, Court Offset Donation. Laura reviewed it with a raised eyebrow. Technically poetic, she said. I don't need the money, Evelyn replied, but the students will. Doris came over with a bag of oranges and a small celebratory balloon that read, You win some. She held the check up in mock ceremony, turning his punishment into someone else's blessing. You always did have a flair for elegant revenge. Evelyn chuckled softly. He spent months trying to take from me. I figured it was time he gave something back. Doris grinned. With interest. They sipped tea in the sunroom as rain pattered gently against the glass. Evelyn had started leaving her phone on Do Not Disturb these days. Silence, she'd found, was often louder than any reply. Especially now, when Jason was shouting into the void. Online, his fury spilled out in broken caps and cryptic hashtags. A heart real. So this is what betrayal looks like. Family is a lie. Hider manipulated. Kaniarka cut off. Kyer not done. IH heart real. If anyone's been mentally compromised, it's not me. Time to expose the truth. Hyge Hart, real. My own grandmother weaponized the court against me. What happened to loyalty? He posted screenshots of legal paperwork, out of context lines from old emails, even a blurry photo of the courthouse. His comments section was a mess, half full of strangers egging him on, the other half calling him unhinged. Evelyn didn't read them. She never even logged in. Claire called once, the night the social media spiral peaked. Doris answered on Evelyn's behalf, relaying the basics. No, Evelyn hadn't seen the post. Yes, everything was secured. No, she didn't wish to comment. Claire's voice was quiet. I think he's unraveling, Doris replied. He unraveled the moment he thought love was a transaction. A week later, Evelyn stood in the hallway of the community college nursing building, her check already handed off to the foundation director. Her name would be added to the donor wall. She didn't want a ceremony, just results. As she turned to leave, a young student in scrubs and worn sneakers passed her in the hallway. She was laughing into her phone, backpack slung over one shoulder. Yeah, the girl said. They said the scholarship covered everything. I can finally drop my second job. Evelyn smiled and kept walking. It started as a small piece in the Portland Tribune, a feature buried below the fold of the Sunday Life section, titled, Former Nurse Launches Local Scholarship to Support Next Generation of Caregivers. There was no photo of Evelyn, just a candid image of a nursing student in scrubs holding a clipboard outside the community college building. But her name was in the first paragraph, then again in bold near the center. The Hart Foundation for Caregiving Excellence, established by retired nurse Evelyn Hart. It described her decades of service, her commitment to underserved students, and her quiet but deliberate act of turning private grief into public good. Doris arrived with 2 copies rolled under her arm and a smug grin already in place. They buried it in lifestyle, she said, slapping one paper down on the kitchen counter. But I'd call this front-page satisfaction. Evelyn set down her tea and looked at the article, brow furrowing slightly. I didn't expect them to print it so soon. Your scholarship went live last week. Word gets around. Doris poured herself coffee. You realize this means people will start asking questions. Evelyn nodded. Let them. Later that day, her phone buzzed with messages, not from family, not from lawyers, but from people she hadn't heard from in years. A former colleague at the hospital, a neighbor from 3 streets over, 2 former students from the old community college volunteer program. I read about what you're doing. It's incredible. The city could use more people like you. You didn't just leave a legacy, you built one in real time. Evelyn responded to each one, short but genuine. Thank you. Appreciate you reading. Glad it resonated. She didn't need fanfare. But the quiet affirmation settled something in her bones. Jason saw the article from a tagged Facebook post. Someone he hadn't spoken to in years shared it with a caption. Can't believe this woman's related to you. Total badass. His throat tightened. He scrolled down. Praise after praise. Comments full of admiration. Nobody cared about his side of the story. Nobody remembered the posts, the accusations, the courtroom drama. They saw Evelyn, and they respected her. He slammed his laptop shut and grabbed his phone. No new followers, no shares, no replies to his latest rant. His inbox was empty except for a single text from Dana. She's being remembered. You're just being loud. Jason hurled the phone against the couch. Back at Evelyn's house, Doris raised her glass of sparkling cider in the sunroom. To outliving his cruelty, she said with a smirk. Evelyn clinked her glass without a word, her expression calm, almost unreadable. It's not just that he failed, Doris added. It's that you succeeded in spite of him. Evelyn looked toward the window, where rain slid slowly down the glass. He spent so much time trying to make noise. I just built something that will last longer than the echoes. The toast was simple, but it stayed with them long after the glasses were empty. The following Friday, the community college hosted a small donor appreciation event. Not formal, not grand, just folding chairs under a white canopy on the campus lawn. Evelyn sat near the back, her name discreetly printed on a name card in front of her. She was content to let the focus fall on the students who stood up, one by one, and shared what the scholarship meant. Some stuttered, others spoke with fire, but all of them radiated something Jason never had: gratitude without expectation. Near the end of the program, the foundation director gestured toward Evelyn. She didn't ask for recognition, but we're giving it anyway. Applause broke out, genuine and warm. A few students approached her afterward with shy smiles and tearful thank yous. She just nodded and pressed each of their hands with quiet grace. Claire stood off to the side, arms folded tightly across her chest. She hadn't clapped, hadn't moved. Her eyes met Evelyn's from across the crowd. She didn't say a word, but she didn't walk away either. The invitation arrived printed on thick cream cardstock, elegant serif font, a faint embossed seal at the top corner. The Portland Community Foundation cordially invites you to its annual Impact Gala honoring Evelyn Hart, Legacy in Health and Education. Evelyn read it once, then again. She didn't frame it. She didn't tell many people. She just quietly set the envelope in her desk drawer and marked the date on her kitchen calendar with a single black dot. When the evening came, Doris insisted on picking out the dress. "I don't care if you feel more comfortable in navy. This one is charcoal gray. Structured shoulders, power without shouting." Evelyn allowed it, mostly because she didn't have the energy to argue. The ballroom at the Riverfront Hyatt shimmered under soft golden lights. Round tables circled a raised stage trimmed in velvet. Servers passed hors d'oeuvres no one could pronounce. A string quartet filled the space with something classical and vaguely mournful. Evelyn stood near the entrance, clutching a simple black clutch. No diamonds, no heels, just quiet presence. Doris appeared at her side, wearing a green silk wrap and wielding 2 flutes of champagne. "You're the only one in this room not trying to impress someone," she whispered. "And somehow, you're still the most magnetic." Evelyn accepted the glass. "Don't make me laugh. I can't afford to spill on borrowed elegance." They both smiled. The event moved quickly. Speeches, awards, video montages. At table 14, Evelyn sat with 3 board members, a young nursing student who couldn't stop smiling, and an older woman from the Bridges nonprofit who had clearly been moved to tears before the salad course arrived. Then the lights dimmed. "And now," the MC said, voice echoing through the ballroom, "we present our final recognition of the evening. A woman who redefined what legacy means in this city, not with headlines, but with quiet, determined generosity." Evelyn looked down at her napkin, smoothing the fold with her thumb. The screen behind the stage lit up. Archival photos of her in her early nursing days. Black and white stills from old hospital newsletters, then recent images, her hands signing checks, students in classrooms with her name on the wall behind them. The audience began to clap. Evelyn stood slowly. She stepped up onto the stage as the room rose with her. Flashbulbs popped, phones hovered. For once, none of it felt invasive. She didn't give a speech. She hadn't prepared one. She just looked out over the room, at the students, the donors, the applause, and offered a simple nod, one hand pressed gently over her heart. It was enough. Claire stood at the back of the ballroom. She hadn't RSVP'd. She wasn't listed on the program. She came alone, dressed in black, her hands clasped tightly around her purse strap. She hadn't told Jason. She couldn't. As the applause swelled around her mother, Claire felt something hot rise in her throat. Grief, pride, shame. She didn't clap, but she didn't leave. When Evelyn stepped down from the stage and caught her daughter's eyes across the room, she saw all of it, everything Claire couldn't say. Evelyn didn't approach. She didn't smile. She just acknowledged her and moved on. Outside, under a canopy of twinkle lights and a gentle wind from the river, Doris lit a cigarette she didn't intend to finish. "I hope they got a good shot of you up there," she said. "Not because you care, but because you don't. That's what makes it iconic." Evelyn chuckled softly. "I'm just glad I didn't trip." Doris exhaled. "You spent your years giving everything. They tried to count you down by your age. Tonight you counted yourself up by your impact." Then she added, with a rare note of reverence, "Your years are legacy, Evelyn, not countdowns." Evelyn looked out over the water, her hair lifting gently in the breeze. She didn't respond, but she smiled. It arrived on thick, off-white stationery, folded neatly inside a plain envelope. Handwritten return address, postmarked locally, Jason Hart, Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, Unit 306. Evelyn knew the handwriting the moment she saw it. Tight cursive, slightly rushed, like he was trying to prove something even before she opened it. She didn't open it right away. She left it on the table in the sunroom for 3 days. It sat beside the orchid Doris had given her after the gala. She watered the flower, read the paper, folded laundry, let the letter age under morning light and quiet. On the fourth day, she opened it with the same care she gave to scholarship applications. Grandma, I don't know where to begin. I've had time, maybe too much time, and I realize now how far I went. The court, the messages, the things I said. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on you because I thought you were the one slipping away. You've always been strong, in control, and suddenly, you were pulling away, writing me out. I panicked. I tried to fix it the only way I knew. Loud, aggressive, stupid. I don't expect anything from this letter. I just want you to know I regret it. All of it. You've always meant everything to this family, to me, and I'm sorry. Love. Jason. Evelyn read it once, quietly. No tears, no rage, just stillness. Then she placed the letter in the red folder, just like the others. Not because it was dangerous, but because it no longer mattered. When she told Laura about it during their monthly update, the attorney barely blinked. He's too late, Laura said. Even if he means it now, every word he writes justifies your choices further. You didn't shut him out. You protected yourself from harm. Evelyn gave a small nod. I don't need to reply. Number. But if you ever want it entered into record, I can add it. I don't. The following week, Evelyn visited the college again. She wore flats this time, not for ceremony, but for ease. Her steps were steady now, her mind lighter. The foundation director met her at the front entrance, waving a folder in one hand. We had a surplus, she said. Thanks to your last donation and the gala fundraising. Evelyn smiled. That's good. It means we can accept more applicants for spring. How many more? 8. Evelyn paused, then opened her own checkbook. Let's make it 12. The woman blinked. Are you sure? Evelyn signed her name before she answered. There's room for more. Back home, Doris came over with her usual dramatics. Cookies she didn't bake, gossip she barely verified. She found Evelyn at the kitchen table finalizing a donation summary. Doris leaned over her shoulder. 12 new students? 6 from the nursing program, 6 from health admin. Doris whistled. And people say you can't build an empire after 70. Evelyn looked up. I didn't build an empire. No, Doris said. You built a lifeboat and filled it with people who never asked to sink you first. Evelyn slid the papers into a fresh folder marked Spring Awards. Doris raised her cider glass. You replaced him with 100 grateful heirs. Evelyn didn't toast. She just smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Across town, Jason sat on the edge of his unmade bed, scrolling through his phone. No new messages, no comments, no mention. He checked the scholarship site again. 12 new recipients selected, more to come. He refreshed it twice, as if his name might magically appear somewhere in the byline. It didn't. He looked around the apartment. Empty takeout boxes, a tipped-over chair, the echo of his own missteps bouncing off bare walls. He picked up his phone and opened his notes app. Typed, second letter, then deleted it before saving. The echo was loud enough already. The office was quiet that morning. No phones. Ringing. No footsteps in the hall. Just filtered sunlight on polished wood and the hush of something final in the air. Evelyn sat across from Laura at the same walnut conference table where it had all started. No distractions this time. No arguments to anticipate. No letters to file. Just a single folder with her name embossed at the top. Evelyn M. Hart. Final estate package. Laura adjusted her glasses. I've reviewed everything 3 times. The documents are irrevocable once signed. No edits, no loopholes. Evelyn nodded, slow and steady. The assets move immediately to trust upon death, Laura continued, with distributions locked to your specification. Jason Hart remains fully and explicitly excluded. The no contest clause is ironclad. If he challenges, he forfeits standing before he even reaches the courtroom. Evelyn didn't flinch. Laura slid the first document forward. This one's the master will. Evelyn picked up the pen. Same gold barrel, same deliberate weight. She signed. Second document. Trust administrator appointment. Doris is primary. Claire is listed for administrative oversight only, should Doris decline. Evelyn signed again. Third. Final. Legacy assignment for all residuals. Assets not previously assigned. This clause ensures anything unclaimed goes straight to the Hart Foundation. Evelyn read it through slowly, then signed with a single, graceful stroke. Laura slid the documents aside and reached into her drawer. And now, the notary. A stamp. A seal. A final mechanical click of permanence. Laura leaned back. It's done. Evelyn let out a breath. Long, slow, unburdened. Done, she echoed. No anger. No regret. Just the quiet clarity of a woman who'd given everything she owed and nothing she didn't. The door opened softly behind them. Doris stepped in, carrying 2 coffees and a folded envelope. You're late, Laura said without looking. I like to enter at the moment of closure, Doris replied, handing Evelyn her drink. Evelyn accepted it with a grateful nod. He's out? Doris asked. Permanently, Laura replied. The ink's still wet, but the door's welded shut. Doris smirked, taking a seat. He buried himself with his own words. You just gave the grave a headstone. They sat in silence for a moment, the sunlight slanting lower now, casting gold across Evelyn's hands. I thought I'd feel more triumphant, Evelyn admitted. Laura gave a small smile. Peace is quieter than vengeance. Doris raised her cup. But just as satisfying. Evelyn stood slowly, slipping the final signed copy into her leather handbag. I don't want to think about it again. Then don't, Laura said. From here on, it's automatic. If he ever contacts you again, send it to me. Evelyn nodded once. Thank you, Laura. She turned to Doris. Fireplace? Tea first, Doris said. Then fire. Then silence. That evening, Evelyn sat in her favorite chair, the one with the blue cushion worn thin from years of habit. Her teacup rested on the side table, half full, the faintest curl of steam rising from its rim. The fire cracked gently in the hearth. Not loud, just enough to fill the space with something warm and steady. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like breath through lungs. Inside, Evelyn felt the rare, precise stillness of nothing left to fear. She looked across the room, past the mantel, past the stack of scholarship applications waiting for review, and let her mind wander, gently, unhurried. The house felt different now. Not haunted, not watched, just hers. She took another sip of tea, then leaned back into the quiet. The auditorium was modest. Beige walls, folding chairs, a handmade banner strung across the stage that read, Hart Foundation Scholars, Spring Recognition Ceremony. But to Evelyn, it felt like a cathedral. Rows of families filled the seats, pressed in tight despite the early chill. Some wore borrowed blazers, others held bouquets of supermarket flowers wrapped in cellophane. There was no orchestra, no red carpet, just the murmur of pride, the click of camera phones, and the kind of warmth you couldn't engineer. Backstage, Evelyn smoothed the hem of her charcoal dress and peered through the curtain. 12 students sat in the front row, scholarship folders on their laps. Some looked nervous. A few held hands with trembling parents. One young man wiped his glasses again and again on his shirt sleeve, even though they were already spotless. Doris leaned in beside her. I swear, if you make me cry in public, I'm revoking your tea privileges for a week. Evelyn smiled. Then you better start crying in private. They stepped onto the stage together, but Doris peeled off toward her seat as the event director approached the podium. Please welcome the founder of the Hart Foundation for Caregiving Excellence, Ms. Evelyn Hart. Applause rose like a wave. Not roaring, not performative, just full. Evelyn walked slowly to the podium. She didn't have a speech in hand, didn't need one. She looked out at the rows of faces, young and old, hopeful and exhausted. Every one of them gathered not for her name, but for what she'd made possible. I won't take much of your time, she began, her voice steady, because I've already taken enough from others. Time, patience, expectation. She let the words settle. My only goal now is to give back. She glanced at the students. When I started this foundation, I thought I was patching something, repairing a legacy. But what I learned was that legacy isn't built from blood. It's built from action. She paused, her hands resting lightly on the podium. Each of you carries the weight of this moment, not because I handed it to you, but because you earned it. You carry this forward, not for me, but for the ones you'll serve, heal, and uplift. A ripple of quiet emotion passed through the room. One of the students dabbed his eyes with the sleeve of his white coat. Evelyn nodded once. Thank you for giving me a better ending than I ever expected. The applause this time came louder. Doris stood first, clapping with both hands and a soft grin that was all pride, no pity. After the ceremony, families mingled on the lawn just outside the auditorium. Folding tables held cider and cookies. Balloons bounced lazily in the spring breeze. Evelyn stood near the edge, away from the noise, sipping her cup of cider and watching the students pose for pictures. Then she felt the familiar shape of a hand on her elbow. Claire. She stood beside her quietly, her cheeks pink with wind, eyes glassy but clear. "You did something real," Claire said, voice low. "Something bigger than him, bigger than all of us." Evelyn looked at her daughter. There was no resentment in her gaze, only recognition. Claire stepped closer, then pulled her mother into a full embrace, not stiff, not polite, real. Evelyn hesitated for only a breath, then held her daughter back. "I should have seen it sooner," Claire whispered. "You see it now?" Evelyn said. They stood like that until a breeze rustled the trees above them and laughter from across the lawn rose to meet it. Later that evening, Evelyn sat by the window in her den, watching dusk settle over the trees. Doris snoozed softly on the couch nearby, arms crossed, mouth slightly open. The certificate from the foundation sat framed on the bookshelf. Simple, understated. She didn't need more than that. She sipped her tea. The house quiet again. No whispers, no schemes, just earned peace. She turned slightly toward the firelight and let her thoughts drift back, not in anger, but in memory. And then, with a wry private smile, she said aloud to no one, "At Thanksgiving, my grandson whispered I wouldn't be around next year, so I left him out of the will." The logs crackled. The house didn't just hold warmth now, it held justice.